Self-realization.
Good evening, dear listeners, and welcome to 5 o'clock tea with Dr. Elario. Today, we explore the depths of self-realization. Dr. Elario, how can we begin to understand and apply the concept of self-realization in our daily lives?
Good evening. The first step is realizing that we are more than our body and mind. Self-realization begins with the desire to discover who we are beyond social roles and labels. In everyday life, we can practice observing our thoughts and emotions without identifying with them, like watching clouds pass across the sky.
Interesting. And how can meditation and self-inquiry help us approach this stage?
Meditation helps us calm our minds and create a quiet space to experience our true essence. Self-inquiry, through questions like, "Who am I?" prompts us to look beyond the surface for answers, transcend our egoistic identity, and connect with our inner source of wisdom and clarity.
What challenges can arise along the way, and how can we overcome them?
One of the biggest challenges is getting bogged down in daily routines and distractions, which can distract us from practice. Constancy and discipline in meditation and self-inquiry are essential. Set a daily time dedicated to this practice, even for a few minutes. It is also helpful to remember why we started on this path when we face obstacles.
How can we recognize the moment of self-realization? Is there a common sign or experience?
Self-realization brings a deep peace and acceptance of all that is, no longer fighting or resisting reality. Many speak of an experience of oneness with all that exists, unconditional love and extended compassion for all beings. Although the experience is deeply personal, these qualities are often indicators of the presence of self-realization.
Dr. Elario, do you think that self-realization also depends on divine grace?
This is a profound question, and the answer can vary depending on the spiritual or philosophical traditions one resonates with. From the perspective of many spiritual traditions, especially in the Hindu, Buddhist or mystical contexts of the world's great religions, divine grace plays an essential role in self-realization. Although personal effort in spiritual practices is indispensable, openness to divine grace can accelerate or even make possible the experience of self-realization. Divine grace can be understood as a benevolent force, a presence or influence that helps overcome the limitations of the ego and reveal our true nature. In many traditions, divine grace is said to be available to all, but everyone's receptivity to it varies. Spiritual practices such as meditation, prayer, devotion or selfless service are seen as means of cultivating fertile ground for receiving grace. Therefore, personal effort and openness to the divine are not considered separate but complementary aspects of the spiritual journey. Personally, I believe that self-realization is a dance between human aspiration and divine mystery. Each step forward on the spiritual path can be seen as both an act of personal will and a response to the subtle call of the divine. Divine grace can, in this context, be the light that guides, sustains, and transforms the inner journey, making it possible to discover and embrace our true essence.
Dr. Elario, Alaric J. Northcott, in the book, The Eternity, supports the notion of circle and center, where the circle is the dual world, and the center is divinity, self-realization, and eternity, which can be found at the moment. What can you tell us about?
The concept of the circle and the center presented by Alaric J. Northcott in The Eternity offers a fascinating perspective on self-realization and our relationship with divinity. The idea of the circle as a representation of the dual world and the center as a symbol of divinity, self-realization, and eternity is profound and resonates in many spiritual and philosophical traditions. The dual world is characterized by oppositions, good and evil, light and dark, pleasure and pain. These aspects of the human experience often keep us captive in the cycle of desire and suffering. The center, in contrast, represents a point of balance, peace, and unity, where dualities dissolve, and our authentic essence is found, one with divinity or eternity. Northcott suggests that access to this center, to this self-realization and connection to the divine, is found in the now moment. This means that the present is crucial to escaping the limitations and distortions perceived through the filter of duality and reconnecting with our eternal source. Practices such as meditation and mindfulness are means by which we can train ourselves to live more in the present and free ourselves from the burden of the past and anxiety about the future, thus discovering the path to our inner center. In this context, self-realization is the process by which we become aware of our true nature, which is not separate from the rest of existence but is fundamentally connected with all that exists. Eternity, in this perspective, is not a distant destination or a promise for after death but is the profound reality of our being, accessible here and now, at the center of our being. Thus, the idea of circle and center invites us to recognize and overcome the illusions of duality, to turn our attention inward to our center, where peace, joy, and wisdom are inherently present. It is a call to deep self-exploration and reconnection with our eternal essence that transcends the boundaries of time and space.
Dr. Elario, let me understand that although we are connected to the center, our duty for self-realization is to move towards the center of the circle. Once we reach the center, we receive divine grace.
Yes, it is. The concept we are talking about suggests that although we are, in our essence, already connected to the center, to the divinity, or to the eternal source, we live in oblivion or ignorance of this connection due to our identification with the dual world, with the circle. So, our spiritual journey and effort consist of reminding ourselves and rediscovering this essential connection, moving purposefully towards the circle's center. This direction involves spiritual and self-knowledge practices that help us overcome the limitations imposed by our ego and our identifications with the material and dual world. Personal effort is crucial in this process because it is our step toward recognizing and accepting the divine presence within us. Once we reach the center, or rather, realize and live again in that state of oneness with all that exists, we are said to receive divine grace. This grace is not something that comes to us from without but rather a revelation of what has always been present within us. It is the recognition that we are not separate from the divine but an intrinsic and eternal part of it. Divine grace, in this context, can be understood as a quickening or deepening of our spiritual awareness, an opening of our hearts and minds to our true nature. It is a moment of profound transformation when we realize that what we have been seeking is, in fact, what we have always been. In conclusion, although we are and have always been connected to the center, our journey to self-realization involves a conscious process of returning to and rediscovering this connection. Through our efforts and openness to divine grace, we can experience inner transformation and realization of our true selves.
Dr. Elario, what is the difference between our effort and faith?
Self-effort and faith are two fundamental aspects of the spiritual journey that complement each other, although they operate on different planes of human experience. Personal effort refers to our conscious actions, practices, and discipline in our spiritual pursuit. These can include practices such as meditation, study of spiritual texts, mindfulness practice, self-inquiry, and other forms of self-development. Personal effort is active and requires active involvement of our will and constant dedication to overcome internal and external obstacles that can divert us from the spiritual path. On the other hand, faith is more deeply related to our trust and conviction in the existence of a higher reality or force, in the wisdom of a spiritual path, or the possibility of self-realization. Faith does not necessarily require active action. It is more of a state of openness, receptivity, and trust. It supports our spiritual journey, giving us hope, courage, and comfort in times of doubt or difficulty. The main difference between the two is that self-effort is related to doing, action and practice, while faith is related to being, the state of trust and open-mindedness. Faith can inspire and motivate personal effort, giving it direction and meaning, while personal effort can strengthen and deepen faith through the experiences and achievements it brings. In essence, personal effort without faith can become tiresome and meaningless, while faith without personal effort can remain unrealized and sterile. Compound, however, the two create a powerful balance, leading to spiritual growth, self-realization, and a deep understanding of the mystery of life.
Dr. Elario, thanks to faith, we ended the practices, changed the course and went toward the center.
Exactly, that's right. Faith is essential in initiating the spiritual journey and motivating us to begin and continue practices leading to the center of our being. Faith gives us a foundation to build our search and helps us steer in the right direction, even when we face doubts, challenges or obstacles on our spiritual path. When belief in a deeper reality, a possibility of self-realization, or a divine connection is present in our hearts, it becomes a source of inspiration and inner strength. This belief drives us to seek, explore, and adopt spiritual practices that can help us directly experience the realities we have only intuited until then. Spiritual practices, whether meditation, prayer, spiritual study or other forms of self-knowledge, become tools by which we can draw closer to our center and true essence. They allow us to gradually overcome the layers of illusion and identification with the material and dual world, facilitating a return to our natural state of oneness and harmony with all that exists. Thus, faith encourages us to engage in these practices and sustains us throughout the process, even when progress seems slow or unclear. It reminds us that beyond the limits of our immediate human experience, there is a more profound truth, an unchanging peace and joy, accessible to us through conscious and dedicated effort. In conclusion, faith is the driving force that initiates our spiritual journey, prompts us to adopt the practices necessary for change, and directs us to the center of our being, where self-realization and a deep understanding of life await.
In closing, Dr. Elario, do you have any advice for our listeners at the beginning of their journey to self-realization?
I encourage everyone to start with curiosity and openness without rigid expectations. Every step on this road is valuable. Practice awareness every moment and allow yourself to discover the joy and peace of recognizing your essence. It's a beautiful journey. Like 5 o'clock, it can become a daily moment of reconnection and renewal.
Thank you, Dr. Elario, for sharing your wisdom. Dear listeners, we encourage you to consider these words and find your path to self-realization. Until next time, have a peaceful and wise evening.